My name is Alex Solomon, and welcome to Drawing 102 and 103. In this first lesson, we're going to be drawing some kind of fruit or vegetable. I'm drawing a crab apple, which is kind of challenging. I would recommend a bell pepper. It's easy to see the different sections and forms, which is one of the main purposes of this first project. I want you to hold the pencil like this when you're drawing rather than a writing style like this. This encourages you to make more elbow-driven and shoulder-driven movements rather than wrist-driven movements, which helps you to think about big, major forms rather than tiny details, which can trip up a drawing student when they're first starting out. Holding it like this also helps you draw more varied lines because you're using the side rather than just the point. So this is the line drawing I use for the demo. And before we start watching me draw this, I just want to take like a closer look at just like how these lines are like working really. So you can see that there's no like shading here. I'm just using lines to define form. I can zoom in here. You can see that, for instance, the line on the right there is the edge of this form right there. And then this line is the right edge of this form, which is behind the form that we just looked at. And we know this because how those two lines intersect. That line in front is over the line behind it. And that's as simple as it gets. So all of these lines in front of and behind define these forms. So we're going to switch over to me drawing here. And I'm using a Conte pencil. And I'm starting on the right-hand side here. The left-hand side, for the simple reason that I'm right-handed, and so I'm not going to cover up the left-hand side. I can kind of always see what I'm doing. Sometimes this can be problematic, so I'll start on a different side. I do want to say here that I'm like really annoyed at this point because it was a real struggle trying to figure out how to position the camera so that my head wasn't blocking it. But it worked out anyway. You can see my face here, which I wasn't really planning on, but in some ways it's kind of nice because you can see how much I actually look at the still life. And I'm obviously not looking at that photograph. I just added that to the video. I'm looking at the actual apple on like this little tripod that I set up with a little piece of the kneadable eraser so it wouldn't fall over. And what I'm doing here is I'm just establishing the major forms, what's in front and what's behind, and how this stuff connects. In the handout, I know I lost focus here, but it'll come back in a few seconds. In the handout, I talk about form and I also talk about rhythm. And I think rhythm is not that helpful to think about when you're first starting out. But it is something that I think about a lot, is just how does something like flow together? How do all these forms kind of flow into the other? And that's especially important like kind of when you check the drawing afterwards when you're done to see if it kind of worked out or not. So you can see here that I'm just kind of, again, like I'm establishing what's in front, what's behind with these compound curves. And right there you can see that I kind of like visibly relaxed because like that's basically the drawing. Like the form of the drawing is pretty much done at this point. And you can see that I'm like relatively accurate for the left-hand side of the drawing, but to kind of pop back into focus there. The right side of the drawing, I kind of take a lot of artistic license, and I want you to do that. So drawing is a process of interpretation, especially when you're using line. You have to make all these kind of major decisions as to what needs to be there and what doesn't need to be there. And if, for instance, some part of this still life just isn't working out in a way that I like, I'll just change it. And that's just the process of drawing. Like the goal really isn't to be perfectly accurate. The goal is to just use the object you're looking at as a base for making a good drawing. Like there's no real reason that you need to be accurate. Like I'm not a scientific illustrator, neither are you. And so it's just a tool. Just looking at the object is just a tool to get a better drawing. And drawing from life is just always really helpful because you can look at things and see how they actually kind of fit together. So yeah, you can see that, back there where I kind of just relaxed, sat back for a second, the drawing was pretty much done. I'm just kind of reaffirming all those shapes with darker lines. And you can see that I'm just kind of finding a nicer curve at the bottom there. And stepping back a little bit or moving back a little bit to get a better view of my drawing. That's always really helpful too, because you're always so close to your drawing. Your face is physically close to your drawing when you're making it. And so sometimes you'll over focus on like a specific part when you don't need to. And so there's switch positions just to add a little detail there. Yeah, just kind of moving back a little bit is a great way to look at your artwork and understand how it works. And that's enough. I think basically that's enough to move on to do like some shading or something like that, or do something else with the drawing, or you could just leave it. Something that I do a lot is I'll reverse the drawing. You can use a mirror, you could do it digitally, but it's a good way to check to see if the drawing actually works, because we're not very reliable when it comes to things we've drawn ourselves, because we're just too emotionally attached. So it's helpful to reverse it, especially when you first start out, because you can see what it actually looks like. All right, so how do you actually draw this way? Well, it's not complicated. You just practice a lot. And you practice with timed, quick drawings to force yourself to understand how an object works as quickly as possible. So in this footage right here, I'm just doing 30-second drawings of the apple in different angles. And I'm just moving the apple to a different position there. And then I'm going on to the next one. So the goal here is just get it down as quickly as possible, move on. So you want to be intentional when you're making these drawings. You want to actually try and draw the thing you see, but it's also just a quick drawing. It's like a 30-second drawing. And so it's not going to be perfect, but the idea is to just really kind of put yourself in this situation in which you have to hyper focus and understand something as quickly as possible, so that when you make a drawing that's a little bit more time consuming, or you dedicate more time to it, you quickly understand how it works, and you can do other things than just establish the form. So that's how you're going to learn in this class, is you're going to do these quick time drawings, 15 seconds, 30 seconds, 45, 1 minute, 5 minutes, which was what I did for the more detailed drawing, and then just repeat. And I'm sorry to say, but that is the process, is that repetition is the greatest way to figure out how to practice this stuff. And the more you do it, the better you get at it. In some ways, drawing is kind of like a sport more than it is like English, because it takes, hand-eye coordination, practice, repetition, and there's no way around it, really, other than to just kind of repeat and continually practice. And, I can definitely tell if I haven't drawn for a while. I'm a little out of practice. And I will say that like 2 years or 3 years of constant practice is permanent. Like, you will never not be able to do these kinds of drawings if you just continually practice over and over again. But it does take work, and it can be really tiring. And so one of the major hurdles in some ways to learning how to draw is to figure out how to enjoy the process while repeating it over and over again. And one of the ways you can figure that out is to figure out what you like to draw, what you really enjoy drawing, and draw that a lot. But there's some real nice advantages to drawing really quickly. These kinds of quick drawings have like this level of energy to them that's pretty much impossible to mimic for a long drawing. And lots of artists, once they kind of learn how to draw this way, really can't go back to these more long-term kind of plotting drawings because they just really like that level of energy and the look of those quick drawings that you can't kind of copy in any other way.